Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charity Charge Show. Today, we are joined by Cordell Carter, and he is the executive director and founding director of both the Project on Belonging and the Festival of the Diaspora. Cordell is specializing in the intersection of cross cultural connection and mentorship and just leadership within the nonprofit space. Cordell, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, Grayson, for having me. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing, both broadly at the Aspen Institute and these two incredible programs that you were the kind of founding director of.
Sure. So I've been at the Aspen Institute for almost a decade. Started leading the Socrates program, which is a global forum for leaders to engage in values based Socratic dialogue on contemporary leadership topics. And so you expanded that program over a course of about 7 years or so. And right after, I should say, in spring of 2021, created the Aspen Institute Project on Belonging. And here is where we're leveraging American history to tell a different story, a more positive narrative about expansion, about enfranchisement, about a republic becoming a better version of itself. And so that work was getting across the country in a variety of ways, but mostly forums in different community halls, taking a real Garrison Keillor approach to creating these safe intellectual spaces for people to express their concerns as well as optimism for what our nation is becoming.
Incredible. And tell me a little bit more about how that fits broadly, because it connects so closely with how I understand the goal of the Aspen Institute is. Can you
Yeah,
share a little bit more about that?
sure. So Aspen does three big things. It's leadership, ideas, and action. And there are probably 80 different programs spread across the different divisions. I lived in the public division that did more externally facing work. But there's a group that we have policy programs, several dozen of them, that are what I call communities of practice. So if you're in high seas or if you're interested in tech policy or you name it, you would know about that program because they're doing specific convenings on specific topics. And so it makes for a very uh, um, engaged intellectual community because it's just everyone is kind of nerding out on their thing. And so it's like a university for the civil society. Our biggest event every year is called the Ideas Festival. And that's in Aspen every year, but there are Ideas Climate, there's Ideas Health, you name it. There's also, you know, a sports and society program. There's a philosophy and society program. There's philanthropy and society program. So on and on. Moreover, there's 16 international institutes, and I had the pleasure to work with 10 of the 16. They're in Romania, Japan, Italy, France, the UK, New Zealand, Colombia, Mexico, just on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so it's an incredible intellectual environment to be a part of.
I would love if you could share what is your personal mission? What is your personal goal that you are really looking to get done with the organization and the missions that you're a part of?
My job is to connect. I'm very good at like identifying people who should know each other. I have a very broad and global network just because of traveling and just the nature of my work, and doing a lot of professional fellowships and the like. Just makes for a very, I would call a motley crew. But getting that motley crew together so they're less motley and more collaborative is the goal. And so I create platforms for them through the Festival of Diaspora, our global platform. We're doing Diaspora on the African continent, Latin America. We're actually based in Medellin. It looks a lot like an ideas festival if the vast majority of the people spoke multiple languages. That's kind of like the Festival of Diaspora. There isn't one language for diasporic communities. There's multiple languages. But I think there's a lot of beauty in finding a language that works for everyone, and a way of communicating that works for everyone, an expression. But the goal is to connect people to action, be it resources to great projects, be it organizations to leaders they don't know, being two amazing entrepreneurs that should be doing work together and they would like explode in terms of the impact they have. And I have a variety of platforms at Aspen, at the festival, and other places to put these people on the stage together and watch the magic happen.
I would love to narrow in on the Festival of the Diaspora. You have your
Hmm.
fifth annual festival coming up. Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about how that's been and how planning is going.
Yeah, so we are very odd in that we change locations every year. It's exciting, but it's a lot of work. But it was created, frankly, because I felt back in 2020 and 21 that there was a generation of leaders, mostly Gen Xers, that are being kind of cut out, being squeezed. The boomers are still in place, and then the perhaps the largest generation since the boomers, the millennials, are right clipping on our heels. And so those 48 to 55-year olds are getting squeezed in organizations. That's why so many have gone entrepreneurship, just because there was just no room for them. And so I wanted to create a space where we could really lean into their voices, their frustrations, and moreover, their innovation. They've had to be more innovative. They didn't really have a choice. And so that's where it started on the beach in San Juan in 2022. The next year, we traveled to Cartagena, and we had one of those aha moments where we had new funders, Google, Meta, Black Ambition, which is Pharrell Williams, his nonprofit, focused on entrepreneurship, and a host of others, some pharmaceutical companies, and in Dubai. And then the next year we went to Rio de Janeiro, and that is, to me, is where we hit that we discovered Aid, and this idea that you're navigating the secular and the sacred at all times. And Brazil is a very special place because they've made spirituality a part of daily life. And you see people literally referencing African orishas in common speech, every colloquial speech, every single day. And I'm like, who are you referencing again? It's like, who is X? Oh, that's my deity. I'm like, okay, got it, got it. But that's just not how we speak in North America. And so it's been very, very refreshing to be a part of that. And actually, I'm looking forward. I'll be back next month, actually co-chairing a summit where we can go deeper in these topics in Sao Paulo. And so the festival has grown tremendously over the last 5 years. We now have, like, I would say, four distinct parts. One is the pitch competition, the Black Ambition pitch competition. It's great. I actually created an organization called Cost Innovation to help I kind of run the year-round work around that. The second part is the actual content from our experts. We have just amazing, brilliant people who often are not on stage because their bosses are. And so it'd be creating that voice, what I call it the middle cheese. You have big cheese, little cheese, middle cheese.
Yeah.
So we have space for the middle cheese, and it seems to be persistent to have 6 to 10 different themes, from environment to corporate governance to the future of artificial intelligence in our society. So those topics are covered. Then we have our fashion show, which is new. We discovered our first year of the competition, the number 2 prize winner was a fashion designer, and she was invited to the biggest fashion show in Colombia. The entry fee for that show, $10 USD. Okay, now considering these companies are typically average between 10 to 15,000 US revenue, and that's a good size.
Yeah.
That's like 3 people working on one company in Colombia. It's like it's almost impossible. She figured it out. She got loans. She made it happen, because once you're in this fashion show, you're good.
Yeah.
People are going to buy your things. But I said, well, if I can create a middle step that wouldn't have as much barriers to entry, I think it'd be great. And so we debuted it this past February, at our 4th annual show in Medellin, and it was fantastic. Moreover, the designers were part of an exhibition hall, and they sold, 6 months worth of product in 3 days, because you had all these North Americans with dollars that were
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, I love you have that in my size." It's like, I don't, but I can make it so. And so, looking forward to furthering that partnership. And then the last piece is the newest. We're debuting in Puerto Rico next March the 13th to the 15th, and it's called FOTD 100. And this is a leadership list where we're going to nominate and honor 100 leaders across North, Central, South America that are just doing great things for humanity in different sectors. We want them to be in the room together,
Mm.
because I think it could be a powerful explosion of impact to get these folks who do not know each other, who've been nominated by various parties, in a room, all getting the same leadership award, all appearing on the same podcast, all getting the same social media kit for their LinkedIn. I think it can be pretty amazing. Moreover, we get to benefit from their networks as well, people we may not know. One of the big missions is to really lean into, as I said, cross-cultural communication and collaboration. And so often you'll see, okay, well, this is a Black philanthropist event, or a Latino philanthropist event, or Indigenous philanthropist. Like, no, it's all of us. In the Americas, you come by force or choice. Pick one. You only have 2 options, all right? And that means we are all part of a diaspora community of some sort, and all are welcome. And we've priced it so that it's accessible by people of a variety of economic statuses. So we're trying to decrease those barriers to entry, and thanks to our sponsors, we've been very successful with that over the last 5 years.
And there's just so many important themes that you are exploring through the festival and just through the work that you're doing,
Hmm.
connection, philanthropy, and just the overall philanthropic landscape. The theme I would love to dive into that you're actually addressing next year is the future of the philanthropic sector. And,
Mm.
right now there's a lot of uncertainty within the nonprofit space. The need for nonprofit services are growing broadly across the sector. And then the funding that's coming down, especially at a federal level, that's shrinking. Where does this fit into your ideas and approach on where philanthropy is going this year? And what are some things that you think leaders in the space can do to address these challenges?
Well, I'll start with the philanthropic sector leaders, actually at foundations. They are doing some things that I think are very positive. One is that they're tapping into more of the corpus. Even Gates announced they're going to spend down over 20 years. And this is important because you can make bigger bets. Something I used to work at, big philanthropy. And something weird happens in these organizations and that people become risk adverse. And because you have to defend that investment to your colleagues, like this is a venture capital firm, it is venture capital, but for civil society. And so I think you need to remember that this is intended to be catalytic funding and that you should be more risk taking because it takes a variety of methods to achieve something in civil society. This is not buying widgets. This isn't simple. Education is about developing a human that has a variety, a multivariant universe that they exist in, and
Mm,
all types of things can impact their success. And so you have to be willing to fund things that are out of the box. And so that's at the highest level. And I would say the secondly, philanthropies, funders are market makers. And there's a lot of crap in the market in the nonprofit space. Let's just call it what it is. There's some organizations that should not exist. All right. They're duplicative. They're focused on one relationship they have. And that's enough to sustain, a small team. How much more powerful would impact be if funders were saying, you five organizations all apply for the same grant. You do the exact same thing. I want you to help me by merging to one organization that can do all the things I need you to do to enable the strategy. They can do that. They can incent that behavior. And I would strongly suggest that they do. Flipping it to the practitioner side, the best way to get funded is to prove that you don't need it. I know it sounds controversial, but funder wants to fund a winner because of the reason I said before. They're risk adverse. Okay. But the same people get funded over and over again because they've proven they'll win. Right. And so you got to figure out a way to win with what you currently have. That's number one, even if it's shrinking down the scale. And then you can tell the story of success that makes you more fundable to a funder. Right. Number two, as I mentioned, some of us don't need to exist. If you have a slight tweak of something that's bigger, that's already out there, be humble enough to say, hey, is there a way we can work together? Or maybe I should go under a fiscal sponsor for a while and think about, a landscape analysis of the market that I want to be in and figure out what's the true value prop that I'm bringing that's so distinguished that is worthy of funding. So we have to put the funder's view here as well. Would you like to be on the receiving end of 1,000 applications and there's one tweak per application? No, that sounds like a horrible way to spend your day. And so let's make it easier for them by reaching out to our peers and saying, hey, is there something we can do together on this? A way where there's a win-win solution that we can find so that we can go to that funder as a much stronger team. So those are the two things. And then thirdly, we can't expect philanthropy to fill in the gap of the federal government. When I was at the Gates Foundation, I remember we said wow, the biggest funder, Gates Foundation Education, was giving $400 million a year, right? Well, the federal government was doing $400 billion. Okay, so there's no organization, even a consortium of organizations that can replicate what federal government can do, and so we have to change the paradigm on what is expected from philanthropy. They can't fill in the gap. They'll send out their corpus for the year and be gone, and there goes the investment strategy, just keeping you afloat. Perhaps this is time for us to cull the fat. I worked in K-12 too. I remember once we had to cut the central office in half, go from 610 people to 300. I mean, we did it and we waited for the impact at the beginning of the fiscal year in September 1. And we waited and we waited. 6 weeks in, we're like, what were those other 300 people doing? Okay. So we have to ask some tough questions of ourselves. Like, I know the work is important. Of course it's important. And you don't want to disenfranchise people. I get that. I'm an empathetic human, but you also can't waste people's money. You really have to be focused on the mission, and that requires some tough calls. But that's what leadership is about: tough calls.
I love that. And hits on this important theme right now, especially because as we were talking about, there are these constraints that are being put within the nonprofit sector. They're being asked, and but some people think it's too much. As you mentioned, they're filling gaps
Hmm.
that really could be done through the government or through other entities or through better efficiencies. And this is really where it takes smart nonprofit leaders to figure out how to run things more efficiently. And I think that is an overall encompassing theme of what you were kind of approaching
Yeah.
there is that idea of
Mhm.
efficiency.
Absolutely. I mean, and we need M&A activity, just like the private sector. I mean, nonprofits is a private sector organization, and so you could do M&As. I'm sorry, mergers and acquisitions, and I would strongly suggest that people do more of it.
Do you have is there any example that comes to mind of, fellow colleagues in the nonprofit space that have been using this as a strategy to successfully navigate the challenges that have been happening in recent terms?
Absolutely. Cultural Vistas is one. They merged with Global Pathways, and then the CEO of Global Pathways became the CEO of a joint entity, and that entity that heavily is dependent upon State Department funding for J-1 visa programs is thriving in all of this. Why? Because the merged organization is the biggest, baddest player in that space. So even if you shrink the pool of available funding, they're going to get the lion's share because they're the biggest one in the space. And so it actually benefited the missions of both of their respective organizations to merge. And so I think it becomes about survival right now. People are getting squeezed on all sides. Organizations are being squeezed. Budgets are being squeezed. We are definitely going to lose some FTEs. Get that through your head. You're not going to be able to save all the FTEs. The goal is to save the mission and to preserve the impact that you're already making. And if mergers and acquisitions is a way of doing it, like it's your fiduciary duty to at least investigate it.
Love that. For, a nonprofit that's at a smaller scale within their local community, what would be some advice for, a local nonprofit that's just looking to make a localized impact?
I would say partner with your local government. When I was in a local nonprofit in Tennessee a decade ago, one of the big turning points for us was starting to work with the city schools because then we became eligible for city funding. And that revenue stream, they literally just wrote us into the budget. It was a game changer because then I can go to a foundation and say, will you match what the city is already doing? Oh, the city is funding you? Yeah. All of a sudden we're doubling up on to do the exact same thing because it's on strategy for these philanthropic organizations. And so I would say definitely find a partner in the local government that likes what you're doing, the local community foundation, because it's typically a donor advised fund and people are looking for advice on who to fund. And so you need to be on the radar of the community foundation if you're doing good work, because it's going to fit somebody's investment criteria and they'll be able to direct the funding your way.
Love that. That's a great answer, and I think it's really important for people to be thinking of, that way and kind of fitting that gap within their community, and then the funds will follow.
Hmm.
I would love to circle back. You had this important theme of humbleness in leadership. I would love
Mm-hmm.
to dive more into that and just your philosophy of how nonprofit leaders internally should be thinking about and navigating the nonprofit sector and space with the challenges that they're facing right now.
Well, I think the leaders, number one, have to be real clear on what their leadership theory or philosophy is. Mine is I use a sports term that I'm the coach and I have to give my team an opportunity to win.
Mm,
And that means they have to have an upwardly mobile professional experience, whether I have them for 2 days, 2 years, or 20 years, because it is really expensive to replace people all the time. When I was a much worse manager and I was cycling through people very quickly, I was like, wow, these people have no commitment. And you forget that the common denominator is you. And it took an executive coach to say, hey, Cordell, you're the problem. And for me to be humble and go back to people that left and say, hey, I get it. I am so sorry. Would you consider coming back? Because their endorsement of your leadership is frankly the highest praise that you can get. Forget what the organization is
mm,
about. If people go into work for specific leaders, they don't go to work for Aspen, they go work for Cordell because they know Cordell is going to give them a great experience. So you got to be real clear on what your philosophy is and
mm,
live it every single day. The second thing is to know that this is you always have to think of the nonprofit in terms of profit and loss. Forget that, just take nonprofit out of your mind. And it doesn't change the game at all. You still have to focus on P&L, and there's no magic that's going to happen that's going to write your books. Only revenue writes your books. So you got to figure out what are your revenue generating opportunities,
yeah.
where are your lags here, and that's when you have to be razor sharp, empathetic yet firm. If an FTE isn't producing, you just can't afford that long term. You just can't. You try to accommodate to get them a role that fits, but at some point you gotta cut your losses to stop that flow of revenue outside the organization. I think that the third thing I would say is I do believe we're in a temporary moment and pendulum swings
Mm,
pretty hard both ways in this country, especially in the last 20 years. And so there will be a moment, I think, fairly soon where we're having a very different conversation about funding in the nonprofit space, where I think the federal government comes back in because you realize, wow, those cuts they're creating more costs for us in other ways.
mm,
And so we're not like winning at all and people aren't happy and the country is losing. And so let us restore some of these things that we cut. And we have to have strong organizations that are capable to execute. Okay, because the feds don't play with you. You have to deliver on those federal grants. They're great opportunities, but it's also some stringent rules
deliverables.
related to the money. Absolutely, you have to deliver, or you'll be in front of Congress. And trust me, that's not the way you want to be in front of Congress. And so I think this is that moment where the strong are going to survive and the weaker organizations are going to disappear. And it's coming upon us fairly rapidly,
Mm,
because those cuts are just those tie off grants are starting to phase out. And beginning of next year is going to be very different, and we're going to see a lot of organizations disappearing or getting much smaller. But I suspect if you can survive over this intermediate time, you'll be much better when things change around. And the last thing I'll say is we have to be scrappy. There's a lot of things I would typically outsource that I'm doing myself,
mm.
because it's cheap. I'll just do it. It's cheaper. I don't have to explain it to someone, and someone say, "Oh, that's beneath you. You're the founder." Blah blah blah. I'm like, I need this stuff done. I need it done with fidelity, and I know I can deliver with fidelity. And yes, it's going to take a little more time, but I don't have the luxury of training up someone to deliver and then managing their execution. I just don't. This is not the environment for that. We have to be a bit miserly with our funds and be squirreling away essentially an operations fund that can kind of even out those lean
Those
months because it's getting lean. It's getting lean. And
100%.
so many of us, myself included, are living off of those little funds that we've been squirreling away for the last few years because this is that it's raining. And so we need that rainy day fund to kick in.
100%. Well, I love that. And the two things that really I pulled from that is that as a nonprofit leader, you're already dealing with these challenges in the nonprofit sector of high turnover.
Yep.
So, where you can make an impact and a difference as a nonprofit leader is creating that environment that retains talent and nurtures it
Hmm.
to reduce that cost and burden for your organization.
Definitely. It's cheaper to keep them. Always cheaper to keep them.
The other thing that I really loved is that right now it's a resource scarce environment in terms of funding. And that is an environment that really the other big resource nonprofits and nonprofit leaders have is that time component and
Hmm.
leading in and really utilizing that time to the best use for the organization. That is it's a vital part of the piece right now as you have to be lean and intelligent organizations.
Yeah, and I think big philanthropy, I should say, are making bigger grants, longer term grants, and that's going to be a game changer.
Mm.
Just expending the energy to be compliant with a report for a 1 year grant versus a 5 year grant that you're checking in every 6 months. It's a game changer.
In terms of the structure.
Exactly. And right now, frankly, I mean, small organizations get these smaller grants, shorter term, high compliance. More established organizations get longer term grants, less compliance. But then we're arguing for innovation, arguing for inclusion. I'm like, my friend, like you have to innovate your practices. You have to sit back and say, okay, this organization's been around for 3 years, but they have a lot of credibility. They're having rapid impact. We're going to do a 5 year commitment to them. So they want the word they can focus on execution, and that is something that can easily be done. And I would strongly encourage big philanthropy to do it.
I would love to end on one. Where are you going with your organizations? What's on the time horizon? Obviously, the festival coming up next year,
Hmm.
early is big. Anything else on the horizon for
Yeah.
you?
We sure do. As I say, I'm co-chairing a summit in Sao Paulo next month called the Oasis Summit in Sao Paulo. We are doing the Afrofuturism Festival in Salvador, Brazil. And this is the first week of November. And then three big events next year for the festival include the Spirit of Tulsa, which will be take place in October. We're leading dialogue on reconciliation for in Colombia in August. We're doing a diaspora dialogue in Ghana in June, and then of course the festival next March in Puerto Rico.
That's incredible. And if you could leave for our nonprofit audience one actionable piece of advice you would give them, what would be the most important takeaway from our conversation?
Walk for an hour every morning before the sun rises to get your head together, because as soon as you're done with that walk, you got to put on a hard hat. It's tough times, but this too shall pass.
I love it. Cordell, thank you so much for joining and
Thank
sharing more
you.
about your philosophy and the work you're doing at the Aspen Institute and the incredible work out for the Festival of the Diaspora.
Thank you so much, Grayson. Thank you for your time.